Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I hadn't seen Hannah in nearly 15 years when she messaged me out of nowhere. The name alone stopped me cold. I'd been scrolling mindlessly after work, numbed by exhaustion and the faint hum of the laundromat machines downstairs when the notification lit my screen. A name I hadn't spoken out loud since I was 17. One I had carefully buried under the weight of silence. Hannah. My chest tightened as though I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't. It wasn't just nostalgia. Nostalgia can be soft, wistful. This was sharper. The past ripping through the walls I had built. I've missed you. Let's meet. Same place. The words glowed against the screen. The same place, and that was all she wrote. And she knew I'd understand. I sat there with my phone burning in my hand, the hum of the dryers below shaking through the thin floorboards, the February wind seeping through the cracked window frames. My apartment was always drafty, always colder than it should have been, like heat was something I didn't deserve. The walls were thin, the plaster peeling in soft curls, but it was home. I'd learned to live in smallness, small spaces, small paychecks, small indulgences. I was 32. Single. A nurse's aide at a clinic on Lyle Avenue. Working 12-hour shifts and spending the rest of my days staring at the ceiling, wondering when I'd stopped imagining something better. Rochester was all ice and salt-crusted sidewalks this time of year. People hurried, heads bent against the wind. I was one of them, faceless and forgettable, but Hannah. She had once been the opposite of forgettable. Back then, we were two shadows stitched together. She was magnetic even when she scared me, especially when she scared me. There was always something about her. Too pale, too intense, her laughter like it cracked something open. And me? I followed. We had secrets. 100 of them. The kind girls invent to feel alive, and one that was real. The one I had prayed she'd forgotten, and yet here she was. The farmhouse. I knew that was what she meant. The abandoned one on Chili Avenue. Half collapsed, its windows shattered, the roof sagging like a broken spine. The place we had claimed as ours, swearing loyalty in whispers under its rotten beams. Where we had dared each other deeper, always deeper, until that one night when we'd gone too far. I almost laughed at the thought of meeting her there again. But laughter turned sour in my throat. I felt that twist deep inside me, curiosity and guilt braided together. By the time I realized what I was doing, I had already texted back, "When?" I told myself I wasn't going. But the next night, I was standing on the shoulder of Chili Avenue, my breath coming out in white clouds, the yellow glare of a broken streetlight buzzing overhead. The farmhouse rose in the distance, black against the snow, its outline crooked as though the land itself had tried to push it away. She was waiting for me by the broken porch steps. For a moment, my body froze. Because Hannah looked unchanged. Not just younger than me, unchanged. Like time had been afraid to touch her. Her skin was still milk pale, almost translucent. Her hair fell in the same long waves it had when she was 17, catching faintly in the dim light. And her smile, God, that smile, too wide, too knowing. I wanted to ask how, why, but my throat closed. Instead, I forced a laugh that cracked like ice. "You look the same." She tilted her head, eyes gleaming dark. "And you look tired." Her voice hadn't changed either. Lilting, a little mocking. When she reached for my hand, I flinched before I let her take it. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was strong. "Too strong. Come on," she whispered, tugging me toward the doorless frame of the farmhouse. Inside, the air hit me like damp cloth. Mildew, cold earth, a smell I remembered instantly but wished I didn't. The floorboards creaked under my boots, groaning low like they carried more weight than just ours. Hannah led me into the main room, where graffiti bled across the cracked plaster walls, faded spray paint, obscene drawings. But beneath it, I swore I could see the marks we had carved with pocket knives as kids. Our initials, looping hearts, promises we never kept. She sat cross-legged on the floor like no time had passed. I stayed standing, arms wrapped around myself. "Why here?" I asked. My voice sounded small in the vast dark. "Because it's ours," she said simply. Her eyes kept flicking toward the hallway, the one that led deeper, toward the cellar, The air seemed colder in that direction, the shadows thicker. I tried not to look, but my eyes dragged back anyway. We talked, or rather she asked. She wanted to know everything about me, about the years I had spent, but when I asked about her, she laughed softly and said, "You know me." Except I didn't. Not anymore. And maybe not ever. The first visit should have been the last, but I went back. Something about her drew me in the way it always had. I told myself I just needed closure, that seeing her again would finally let me bury the past. But instead it was like opening a wound that had never healed. By the third time, the noises began. At first I thought it was the house. Old beams, shifting foundation. But no, it was too deliberate. A soft laugh in the hallway. Whispers that rose and fell like voices in another room. And one night, as the wind rattled outside, I heard my mother's voice. Sharp, angry, cutting through the dark. She had been dead for 10 years. "Hannah," I whispered, my throat tight. "Did you hear that?" Her smile widened. She reached across the space between us and took my hand again. Her skin felt damp this time, clammy, but I couldn't pull away. "Don't you remember?" she asked softly. Her words burrowed under my skin. And suddenly, I did remember. The cellar. The boy. His face blurred in my memory, but his scream was sharp as glass, echoing even now in the corners of that house. I jerked to my feet, panic rising like bile. "I need to go." She didn't move. Just watched me with those two bright eyes. "We're not done. You promised me forever." Her voice followed me as I stumbled out into the freezing wind, down the road to where my car was parked. When I slammed the door shut, my hand shaking, I caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat. Smiling. I twisted around. The seat was empty, but when I looked back at the mirror, she was still there. I thought leaving the farmhouse would save me. It didn't, because now, weeks later, I wake at night to muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bed. My phone lights up on its own, messages typing themselves, "Stay, stay, stay." And some nights I feel her lying beside me, her hair damp against the pillow. And sometimes, this is the worst of it, when I look in the mirror, I don't see myself at all. I see her smile, and it's growing wider every day. I started locking my doors. All of them. Front door, bedroom door, even the bathroom if I stepped inside for more than a moment. I told myself it was paranoia, a phase that the farmhouse had just stirred something ugly I had buried too deep. But the footprints kept appearing, wet and mud dark, pressed into the worn carpet that no one else had reason to walk across. I scrubbed them away until the fibers frayed. But they always came back, sometimes in pairs, mine and hers. At the clinic, exhaustion slowed my hands. Patients stared at me like they knew something was wrong. My supervisor, Nancy, pulled me aside after a 12-hour shift and whispered, "You need rest, Han." But what she meant was, "You look haunted." I stopped answering calls from friends, what few I had left. Even Jess, who had tried faithfully for years to tug me out of isolation, gave up after her last voicemail. "Call me back or I'm showing up at your door. I mean it." I didn't call back because I was afraid Hannah would answer. Nights grew heavier. At first it was whispers in the apartment, the kind you could almost mistake for the hum of pipes. But then I started recognizing the words, fragments of conversations Hannah and I had shared as teenagers. Our promises, our secrets. "Don't tell anyone. Cross your heart." And then other voices slipped in. My mother's bitter tone, years dead. A boy's voice I couldn't place but knew in the marrow of my bones. The boy, the one we had left down there. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe there hadn't been a boy. Maybe it was just some story Hannah and I had spun to feel dangerous, alive. Teenagers lie to themselves, invent monsters in the dark. But the screams, God, the screams, were too sharp to be invention. I dreamed often now. Always the farmhouse, always Hannah's hand slipping into mine. The walls moved in those dreams, the hallway stretching like taffy, the cellar door breathing, expanding with each heartbeat. When I woke, the dream clung to me, sticky like spider silk I couldn't peel away. One morning, I found my phone on the nightstand lit up with a draft message. 3 words, and come back tonight. I hadn't typed it, I deleted it. I swore I deleted it. But later that day at work, my phone buzzed. Sent messages to Hannah. "Come back tonight." I dropped the phone. It hit the floor hard enough to crack the case. I lasted 4 more nights before I went back. I didn't decide to go. My body just carried me there. Like muscle memory, like something in me knew it belonged to her. The farmhouse leaned darker against the sky, its silhouette jagged as though the earth itself rejected it. Snow crunched under my boots, the air biting sharp. She was already waiting. Same porch, same smile, unchanged. "You came back," Hannah whispered, my throat closed. "Why me? Why now?" Her smile stretched wider. "Because you remember." Inside, the air was heavier than before, thick with mildew and something else. Sweet, rotten, like fruit left too long in a cellar. The boards groaned as though something paced beneath them. I tried not to look toward the hallway, but my eyes dragged there anyway. The cellar door waited at the end, swollen with moisture, its outline faint but unmistakable. "You know what's down there," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a thread pulling me closer. I shook my head. "It was just a story. We made it up." "No," she whispered, stepping close, her cold breath brushing my cheek. "You left him. We left him." Her hand slid into mine, damp, tightening like iron. "He's still waiting." The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Each step I took echoed back, multiplied as if more than 2 sets of feet moved. The cellar door loomed larger, swollen, breathing. My chest heaved. "I can't. You promised," Hannah hissed. Her grip bruised my hand. I wanted to pull away, but the floor beneath me seemed to tilt, drawing me forward. The walls groaned, plaster cracking like ribs. Shadows spilled across the ceiling, stretching like arms. The cellar door pulsed. Once, twice, then it opened. The stench hit me first. Rot, wet earth, something fouler, human and not. My stomach clenched, bile rising, and then I heard him. The scream I remembered, sharp, glass-edged, echoed up the stairs. Only now it was raw, wet, torn into 100 pieces. A sound that had never stopped. I stumbled back. Hannah's grip was unbreakable. Her face was inches from mine now, eyes gleaming dark. "Go down," she whispered. "I won't. You will." And she shoved. The stairs groaned under my weight. The air grew thick, choking. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the screen flickering alive. Words scrolled across it, not typed, not human. "Stay, stay, stay." My knees buckled. But I kept moving, Hannah's voice threading around me, whispering promises we had made as children. Forever. 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 The bottom of the stairs was darker than dark, a void. I reached out blindly, fingers brushing stone slick with damp. The smell was unbearable. And then, movement. A shape shifted in the black. A body, or what was left of one. Hands dragging across the floor. Skin sloughing, eyes burning with something that wasn't life but wasn't death either. The boy. I knew it in my bones, though I couldn't recall his face. He crawled toward me, mouth open too wide, scream scraping raw against the air. I screamed back. Hannah's laughter echoed down the stairs. High and bright, a sound that cracked through the dark. I tried to run, but the boy's hands closed around my ankles, cold and wet, pulling me down. The cellar walls groaned, closing in. My phone clattered from my pocket, screen lighting up one final message as I clawed at the stone floor. "You promised." I don't remember leaving the farmhouse. I woke in my bed days later, clothes damp, skin streaked with dirt. The footprints were back, heavier now, circling the room. My phone sat on the nightstand, the screen cracked. Battery dead, but when I charged it, there were photos of me, sleeping. Hannah's hair spilling across the pillow beside me. Now, every night, I wake to whispers. Sometimes they're hers, sometimes his, sometimes both, twined together. The voices curl around my ears, inside my skull, until I can't tell which ones are mine anymore. I stopped going to work. The clinic called twice, then stopped. I think Jess came by one afternoon. I heard her knock, but I couldn't answer the door. The footprints led straight to it, muddy and waiting, and I knew if I opened it, Hannah would be on the other side. Sometimes I think she already is. Sometimes I feel her behind me, breath cold against my neck. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I don't see my reflection at all. I see her smiling, and when I open my mouth to scream, it's his scream that comes out. I don't know if Hannah ever left that farmhouse. I only know she found me again, and this time she isn't letting go. I was 34 when he found me again. It began with a message I almost ignored. Still remember me? Let's catch up. The name on the screen froze me. Ethan Cole. My childhood best friend. My shadow. My first secret. We hadn't spoken in nearly 20 years, not since that summer at Lake Afton when the accident happened. When the police asked questions, I said I didn't know. I buried the truth, left town, and rebuilt a quieter life in Baltimore. I worked long nights at the hospital, lived alone in a cramped apartment, and told myself the past had drowned with him. But Ethan wrote like nothing had changed, like he was still alive. When I tried to block him, the messages multiplied. Phrases only he and I knew, jokes we'd whispered in the dark. He sent me a photo of the hospital parking lot taken from above, the timestamp matching the minute I left my shift. He was watching. My neighbor Taylor insisted it was a cruel stalker. Detective Harper told me to stay vigilant, though his eyes betrayed disbelief. But the worst was when my mother, who hadn't spoken Ethan's name in years, answered her landline whispering, "Why is Ethan calling me at night?" Then the smell of algae began clinging to my clothes no matter how much I scrubbed. My apartment walls dripped faint moisture, and my dreams were filled with the gurgling sound of bubbles breaking underwater. When Ethan finally appeared at my door, soaked and grinning, I let him in. His voice was wrong, stuttering like a record skipping, yet warm, familiar, seductive. He wanted me to come back with him. He wanted me to confess. He wanted me to join. I ran, down cracked stairwells through midnight streets slick with rain, knowing he was just behind, his laughter echoing like water slapping against rotting wood. I didn't make it home. I made it to the lake. Now I live in the hospital still, but the mirrors ripple when I walk past. Patients smell pond water when I enter their rooms, and every time I close my eyes, I feel Ethan's hand tightening around my wrist, pulling me back to the place where we left him. The world thinks I survived, but I know the truth. I've been claimed. The narration now expands into a slow-burn 11,800-word psychological horror novel. Below continues Part 1, immersive detail, character depth, and sensory horror. I worked the late shift the night that first message arrived. The ER had been a parade of fevers, sprains, and one stabbing that left a red trail across the linoleum like someone had dragged a dripping mop. I was so bone-tired I almost dropped my phone when it buzzed. The screen lit my face in the staff locker room's buzzing fluorescent glow. Ethan Cole. The name alone made my chest tighten. I hadn't said it out loud in years. It was a name I had folded neatly into the back of my mind, tucked away like brittle paper that might disintegrate if touched. And yet here it was, glowing with casual familiarity. Still remember me. Let's catch up. I could hear his voice in those words, that lazy drawl, the grin always hiding just behind it. I swallowed hard and shoved the phone into my scrub pocket. It had to be a prank. Someone from home? A cruel joke? Baltimore was gray when I stepped out that morning. The pavement slick from last night's drizzle, streetlights still buzzing faintly against the dawn. The city had grown on me in a quiet way. I rented a small one-bedroom above a laundromat on Franklin Street, where the hum of dryers downstairs filled the nights with mechanical breathing. The place smelled faintly of detergent and mildew, but it was mine. I worked at Mercy Hospital, the kind of place that blurred days and nights until all you had was the antiseptic sting in your nostrils and the mechanical chirp of monitors. I liked the predictability. I liked that no one here knew me as anything but Anna Pierce, RN, not the girl from Kansas. Not the girl from Lake Afton. I tried to ignore the message. I tried so hard, but by the time I reached my apartment and dropped onto the couch, my phone lit again. "You haven't changed much. Do you still bite your nails when you're nervous?" I froze, my hand halfway to my mouth. Nobody here knew that. Nobody could. I locked the phone and threw it onto the couch. My skin crawled. By the second day, the messages came like clockwork. Morning, noon, midnight. Little phrases that gnawed at me. Remember the tree fort? Remember the dock? I wanted to throw the phone into the harbor, but something in me, a dark traitorous part, kept reading. By the third day, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lake, the algae green surface shivering under the July sun, the rope swing. Ethan's pale hand breaking the water before disappearing again. I told myself it was just a prank, but the text kept digging deeper. "Still keeping secrets, Anna. You were always good at that." The words made my stomach flip. It was Taylor who noticed first. She lived across the hall, a teacher who spent evenings grading papers at her kitchen table. Sometimes she'd knock and invite me for wine, claiming we were two lonely women in a city too loud for its own good. One evening, I showed her the texts. She squinted at my phone. "Ethan Cole? That's the guy from back home, right?" I stiffened. I'd told her more than I should have one night when the wine made my tongue loose. "Yeah," I said. "But he drowned?" "When we were kids." Taylor frowned, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "So, then this is some sicko messing with you." "I thought so," I whispered. "But they know things. Things no one else could, like what?" "Inside jokes. Stuff we said when we were 12. Stuff about my mom." Taylor pursed her lips. "Anyone from back then could have told someone. Old friends, family." "No." My voice cracked sharper than I meant. "No one knew those things. Not like he did?" Her eyes softened, pity laced with concern. "Anna, you're exhausted. Working doubles, barely sleeping, it makes you see shadows everywhere. Maybe you should unplug. Put the phone away for a while." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I was just unraveling. But when I checked my phone again later, there was a photo waiting for me. The hospital parking lot taken from above, time-stamped exactly 6:02 a.m., the minute I'd walked to my car. The photo of the parking lot changed everything. I brought it to Detective Harper, hands trembling as I slid my phone across his desk. He squinted at it under the buzzing ceiling light, his mustache twitching as though suppressing a sigh. "Could be someone messing with you," he said. "Some creep from the hospital, maybe a patient's family." "People notice nurses, Miss Pierce." I leaned forward, desperate. "At 6 in the morning? From that angle? That's not some random creep. That's somebody trying to scare you." His voice hardened. "And it's working." He slid the phone back. "Stay vigilant. Get home safe. Lock your doors, stay vigilant." Like I hadn't already stopped sleeping, Taylor noticed the bags under my eyes a week later. She knocked one night with a bottle of cheap rosé and the kind of stubborn smile only a teacher could perfect. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. I tried to laugh. "Thanks, that's exactly what I was going for." "Sit," she ordered, already uncorking. "You need something besides hospital air and nightmares." We sat at her small kitchen table, papers and red pens pushed aside. The hum of the city outside faded to the quiet clink of glasses. I told her more than I should have. About the algae smell that clung to my scrubs even after 3 washes. About the dampness spreading in my apartment, the plaster flaking like diseased skin. About my mother's shaky voice on the phone, whispering that Ethan had been calling her landline at night. Taylor listened, her eyes growing wider, her lips pressed tight. "Anna, you need help." "Real help, a therapist maybe. Someone who can separate stress from what?" My voice shook. "From Ethan?" She didn't answer. Her silence was worse than disbelief. The dreams grew thicker, swamp-like. I'd wake gasping, my sheets damp, the taste of algae coating my tongue. The sound of bubbles breaking beneath water filled my ears, gurgling and wet, as if someone were trapped just below the surface. At work, the patients started noticing too. One morning, a woman recovering from pneumonia wrinkled her nose when I walked in. "Why does it smell like the lake?" she asked. Another patient, a child hooked to IV fluids, whispered, "The wet man standing behind you." I spun so fast I nearly yanked my stethoscope out of my ears. Nothing. Just the monitor beeping steadily. The curtains drawn tight, but the air shimmered faintly, like heat above asphalt. The first time I saw him was in my apartment hallway. I'd just finished a double shift, trudging up the cracked stairs with my keys clutched tight. The air smelled wrong, swampy, metallic like lake water in midsummer. And there he was, standing at the far end of the hall, drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead, his grin stretched too wide. His body jerked when he moved like frames missing in a film reel. "Anna," he said, the sound warped, skipping like a record stuck on a groove. "Still remember me?" My keys hit the floor. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. He took one lurching step forward. Water dripped from his sleeves, spreading across the thin carpet. I bolted, shoving past him, or through him, I don't know which, into my apartment and slamming the door. I pressed my back against it, chest heaving. Silence. Then a wet laugh, muffled, right against the wood. I stopped telling Taylor details after that. She already thought I was unraveling. Maybe I was, But she still knocked on my door when the walls dripped, when the smell grew too strong to ignore. She sat with me during long nights when my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She said things like, "You're safe here," even when both of us knew it was a lie. The worst night came with a storm. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rattled the glass. I tried to sleep, but the dripping never stopped. It wasn't from the ceiling, it was from the walls themselves, bleeding moisture pooling across the floor. And then my phone lit up on the nightstand. I'm outside. My breath caught. I crept to the window. Lightning split the sky just long enough to illuminate him below. Ethan. Standing on the street, looking up, water sheeting down his body like it didn't matter, like he wasn't part of the storm but something older, hungrier. The next strike of lightning, he was gone. But when I turned, he was in my apartment, soaked, grinning, voice stuttering as he stepped closer. "Come back with me, Anna. Time to finish what we started." I stumbled back, heart hammering. "You're not real." He tilted his head, water dripping from his jaw. "Then why can you feel me?" A hand, cold, slimy, impossibly strong, clamped around my wrist. I screamed, twisting free, bolting out the door into the stairwell. Down I ran, barefoot, the storm hammering the building as I spilled onto the midnight street. My lungs burned. My feet slapped against slick pavement, and behind me, laughter echoed like water slapping rotted wood. I didn't make it home. I made it to the lake. The storm broke over Lake Afton as if it had been waiting for me. The shoreline gleamed under fractured lightning, algae thick and green across the surface. Ethan emerged from the water, every step jerky, impossible, yet inevitable. His grin never faltered. "Confess," he hissed, his voice fractured into echoes. "Tell them what you did. Tell them how you let me drown." I backed away, but my feet sank into mud, sucking me down. "It was an accident," I whispered. "Liar." His laughter erupted, wet and bubbling as the water surged higher, swallowing my legs, my waist, my chest. His hands pulled me under, the cold crushing me, the algae filling my lungs. I fought. God, I fought. But his grip was iron, and then darkness. I woke in the hospital days later. They told me I'd been found on the lakeshore, barely breathing, hypothermic. They called it a miracle. They told me I was lucky, but I knew better. I live now, if you can call it living. I walk the halls of Mercy Hospital, but patients wrinkle their noses and say they smell pond water when I enter. Mirrors ripple faintly when I pass, and sometimes, just sometimes, another reflection lingers beside mine. Ethan's hand gripping my wrist inside the glass. Taylor avoids my eyes when she sees me, as if she knows something's wrong but can't name it. Detective Harper stopped returning my calls. My mother no longer answers the phone. Everyone thinks I survived, but I didn't. I've been claimed. I was 34 when I heard from Noah again. My name is Eliza Harper, and until that night my life had been ordered with a precision I depended on. I was an office assistant at Cutler & Rowe, Attorneys at Law, on Liberty Street in Fairview, Pennsylvania. The building wasn't glamorous, it smelled faintly of printer toner and reheated soup from the break room microwave, but it was safe. Every morning I arrived at 8:15 sharp, coffee in one hand, keys in the other. I unlocked the supply closet, switched on the copier, and filed contracts in their assigned cabinets. I scheduled calls with clients, maintained spreadsheets of litigation dates, and corrected misplaced commas in legal briefs. My desk was aligned at a perfect 90-degree angle to the blinds, so that when the sun reached 3 in the afternoon, light fell across the beige walls in neat bars. That's how I kept myself together. Routine, repetition, control. I built that control on silence, on never speaking about Noah or Jesse. When his name appeared on my phone, my entire body betrayed me. My hand clenched so tight I nearly cracked the screen. My throat closed as though his name alone could choke me. The message was simple. Let's meet. One last time. 15 years of silence collapsed with that one line. I should have ignored it. Thrown the phone in a drawer, blocked the number, gone back to filing contracts. But my thumb hovered over the screen, my pulse heavy in my ears. A memory forced itself to the surface, bright and sharp. Jesse's red windbreaker vanishing into the quarry, his scream cut short by the hollow smack of his body hitting water, followed by the sound of something else, his flashlight clattering off the rocks. its beam flickering as it spun away into the dark. We were 17. We were drunk, and we left him there. Noah was magnetic even then, reckless in ways that felt intoxicating. He'd dared Jesse to climb the fence. Jesse wasn't our friend, just a kid who tagged along that night, hoping to impress Noah, maybe me too. I can still see the look on Jesse's face when he turned to me, balancing on the edge. His foot slipped, gravel gave way, and then he was gone. Noah had gripped my arm so hard I bruised. "Don't," he hissed. "We can't, we didn't see anything. He'll be fine," but Jesse wasn't fine. The water swallowed him and the quarry was silent again. We swore never to speak of it. Never. Now, 15 years later, Noah had found me. His second text came quick, like he'd known I would answer. "You know where." "The quarry." I didn't reply. I spent the day in the office pretending to work, but the words on the page blurred. The contract smelled faintly wrong, like damp paper that had sat too long in the rain. The neat bars of light through the blind seemed warped, bent by a thin haze as though the air itself had thickened. By the time the sky bruised into dusk, I was driving out of town. The roads were slick with wet leaves, headlights blurring in the mist. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tight my knuckles burned. The quarry looked the same as it had 15 years ago. Fences sagged with rust. Signs warning, "Keep out," leaned half-fallen, ignored by the kids who came to spray paint walls and smash bottles. The pit yawned, black and endless, the air humming with a faint echo of water, though I knew the county had drained it years ago. And there was Noah. He leaned against the fence, just as I remembered him. But something about him was wrong. His movements were jerky, his grin stretched too wide like a mask that didn't quite fit. When he laughed, the sound skipped, caught, and repeated, as though it were a recording glitching on loop. His eyes glittered wetly, reflecting the pit behind us. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse, thick, as if it had passed through water before reaching me. I wanted to tell him I hadn't come for him, that I only wanted him gone from my life. But the words tangled. My chest tightened. We stood by the fence. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, wet and sharp. I thought I heard splashes below. My throat dried. Noah leaned closer, his breath damp and foul, smelling of rotted leaves. "Do you still dream about him? About Jesse?" The name cut through me. I hadn't said it aloud in 15 years. "I don't know what you mean," I whispered, a lie bitter on my tongue. His grin widened, his jaw twitching unnaturally. "Yes, you do. About his jacket. About his scream. About how you watched him disappear." For a second I saw Jesse. Not Noah, but Jesse, water streaming from his hair, his lips blue, his eyes wide with betrayal. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "Stop." But Noah tilted his head, his voice echoing from everywhere at once, distorted and wet. "We promised. If one of us came back, the other must follow." The pit behind him shimmered, shadows deepening. I heard the clatter of Jesse's flashlight again, the hollow strike of plastic against stone, looping, repeating louder each time. I ran. The gravel cut my palms when I slipped, scrambling up the path. Noah's laughter followed me, bubbling, broken like water through pipes. I didn't look back. I ran until I burst onto the highway, headlights blinding me, the world suddenly sharp and normal again. Asphalt. Cold air. Cars rushing past. For a moment I thought maybe it was over, but when I got home my apartment wasn't normal. The air smelled faintly of stagnant water. A damp patch spread across the kitchen floor, seeping up through the wood. On the counter, dripping, sat a Polaroid. It was of Noah and me at 17, arms around each other, smiling. But between us stood Jesse, pale and ruined, his hand gripping mine. Across the bottom, ink smeared and bleeding as though it had just been written, "Time to return." The Polaroid sat on my counter long after I should have thrown it away. I couldn't touch it at first. The photo looked old, the paper worn, the colors faded, but the ink across the bottom bled like it was still wet. I stood there for nearly an hour, waiting for it to dry. It never did. I slid it into a drawer, shut it hard, and went to bed. But the smell of damp earth and rot followed me into sleep, into dreams where Jesse's scream looped endlessly, broken by the hollow slap of water against stone. When I woke, another Polaroid lay on my nightstand. This one wasn't from the quarry. It was my office, my desk at Cutler and Row. light slanting through the blinds at 3 o'clock. I was sitting there typing, unaware. But in the photo, Jesse stood behind me, pale, dripping, one ruined hand resting on my shoulder. His face was blurred like water disturbed. My throat closed. The sheets clung damp to my legs. I told myself I was losing my mind, that stress had finally cracked me. I showered, dressed, forced myself into my routine. By the time I reached the office, I had half convinced myself the Polaroid wasn't real, but the smell hit me the second I walked in. Not toner, not paper, stagnant water. "Morning, Eliza," Paula from reception said. Her voice was too normal, her face too bright, like the world hadn't shifted. "Morning," I croaked. At my desk, I shuffled papers, trying to ignore the haze bending the light through the blinds. The neat bars of sun I always depended on were blurred by mist that shouldn't exist indoors. The contracts in my in-tray curled at the edges, damp, the ink smudged as if the words themselves had drowned. When I opened the copier to replace the toner, I froze. Jesse's face stared back at me from the glossy cartridge, warped and pale, his eyes unblinking. I slammed it shut, my breath ragged. By noon, I couldn't stand it. I left early, muttering about a migraine. No one argued. In my apartment, the smell was worse. The damp patch on the kitchen floor had spread, dark wood softening underfoot. The wallpaper bubbled with moisture. I pressed my hand to the wall and recoiled. The surface was icy, clammy, as though it had been submerged. Another Polaroid waited on my bed. This one showed Noah and me as kids, sitting cross-legged at the quarry edge, passing a bottle of cheap vodka between us. But Jesse was there too, crouched behind us, blurred and pale, his eyes fixed on me. Every day after that, new Polaroids appeared. They came in the morning, the evening, sometimes waiting in my purse or desk drawer. Always Jesse, always pale and ruined, watching from the edges of my life. A birthday party photo where I swore he hadn't been invited. A school dance where he stood in the bleachers. A candid shot at the diner where I'd worked after graduation, his wet hand pressed against the glass behind me. Proof that he'd always been there, watching. The office no longer gave me peace. Contracts reeked of mold. The blinds dripped faint condensation. Once, when I glanced at the reflection in my computer screen, I saw Jesse standing at the far end of the office, staring with those waterlogged eyes. When I spun around, he was gone. At night, the floorboards in my apartment warped, spongy under my feet. Water seeped up through the seams. The furniture darkened with spreading mold. Once, when I opened my fridge, every shelf was slick with green algae, the milk sour and curdled, the fruit rotting in my hands. I tried throwing the Polaroids away. I burned one in the sink, watching the edges curl black. But in the morning, it reappeared on my pillow, whole, damp, the ink wetter than before. Noah returned too. Not in messages now, but in person. I saw him standing at the edge of the quarry when I drove past on my way home, his grin too wide, his movements jerky, glitching like bad footage. When he laughed, it skipped, caught, replayed. "You're late," he rasped, though I hadn't stopped the car. The haunting pressed in day after day. Jesse's name hummed in my ears at night. His scream played on loop, that awful clatter of his flashlight hitting stone. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely hold a pen steady at work. Paula asked if I was sick. Mr. Cutler pulled me aside to ask if I needed time off. I told them no, because what would I do with time? Sit in my apartment while Jesse's face bloomed across the walls like mold? The invasion grew physical. My bathroom mirror warped with condensation, dripping with water that smelled of rust. I wiped it away, only to see Jesse's face staring back instead of my own. I screamed until my throat tore, but no one heard. The breaking point came one night as I sat on my couch, head in my hands, the apartment heavy with rot. The floorboards had softened completely, spongy underfoot, seeping foul water that lapped at the base of my furniture. The wallpaper sagged. The ceiling dripped. My couch stank of mildew, the fabric damp and collapsing beneath me. I heard it then, the clatter of Jesse's flashlight against stone. But it wasn't distant anymore. It was under me. Beneath the floor, I rose on shaking legs. The water swelled, bubbling, and then impossibly a pale hand broke through the boards. Jesse's hand. Bloated, ruined, fingers clawing at my ankle. I screamed, but not in fear. No, in something closer to relief. Because the endless waiting, the photographs, the smell, The invasion, it all led here, the floor gave way, and suddenly I was knee-deep in freezing quarry water, dark and thick, filling the apartment like the pit itself had swallowed me whole. Jesse's grip tightened, dragging me down, and Noah was there too, standing in the corner, his grin split wide, glitching, jerking, his voice skipping like a broken tape. We promised. If one of us returned, the other must follow. I stopped fighting. The water climbed over my chest, my throat, my face. Jesse's eyes locked on mine, wide and endless, and I let go. The last thing I saw was Noah's broken grin and Jesse's pale hand pulling me into the dark, and then nothing but water. I hadn't thought about Daniel in years until the night he called. It was late, almost midnight, when the phone rattled on my nightstand. I jolted awake, half dreaming still, the radiator hissing beside me like it was spitting warnings. The city outside my third-floor window was muffled with snow, headlights dragging shadows across the cracked plaster walls. I fumbled for my phone, expecting a wrong number or another robocall I'd silence. But when I pressed it to my ear, I froze. The voice was warped, leaking through static, like words carried down a frozen wire. But I knew it. I knew it instantly, the way you know the smell of your childhood home the moment you step through its door. Daniel. Mara. My throat constricted. I hadn't heard that voice in 15 years. Not since the summer he disappeared. Daniel? My voice was too loud in the silence of my studio, the single room heavy with shadows and the sour smell of leftover coffee. He didn't answer my question. He just said one thing, his words stretched thin, like he'd been rehearsing them for decades. Meet me where it ended. And then the line went dead. I sat there for hours, the phone still in my hand, my sheets twisted around me. The radiator clanged, the pipes groaned, but none of it registered. Only his words, where it ended. I didn't need to ask where. There was only one place Daniel could have meant. The old railway bridge off Winton Road. That rotting skeleton of wood and iron where we dared each other to walk across in the dark. Where the air smelled of creosote and river rot. Where he vanished, leaving me alone in the black. I had told myself for years that he ran away. Everyone else believed it. That boy had wanderlust, the neighbors said, always staring at the horizon, but I never believed it. Not fully, because I knew what I saw, or rather what I didn't see. One moment, Daniel was beside me on the bridge, grinning through the dark, daring me forward. The next, there was the sharp crack of splintering wood, his sudden silence and the rush of black water swallowing everything, and me, standing frozen, then running. Running, leaving him to whatever waited below. I tried to bury it, tried to leave Winton, leave that night behind. In Philadelphia, I built a quiet, forgettable life. My name was Mara Hayes, 29 when I left home. 31 now, working as a records clerk at the Jefferson Medical Archives. It was the kind of job where you were invisible, sorting patient files in dim back rooms, breathing in paper dust until your lungs felt coated. My co-workers barely knew my name. I liked it that way. Orderly, predictable. No chaos, no voices from the past, at least until the phone rang. For 2 days, I told myself it was a prank. Someone from Winton who remembered me trying to twist the knife. But the voice, that tone, that cadence, it wasn't something you could fake. And then came the signs. On the subway the next evening, just as the train jolted into the tunnel, the lights flickered. For a fraction of a second, the window reflected not just my own tired face, but another beside me. Waterlogged, lips blue, eyes open and staring. A girl. Jenny Clark. Jenny, who drowned in Lake Erie during a boating trip the summer after sophomore year. My stomach dropped, and when the light steadied, she was gone. Only my pale reflection stared back, sweat prickling my scalp. The next morning, walking to the archives, I passed a shattered windshield propped against a dumpster. For a moment, I smelled burnt rubber and engine oil, sharp and acrid. And behind the webbed glass, I thought I saw Chris Hall's face, bloodied, his smile fixed like it had been the night of prom. Chris, who died when his Mustang wrapped around an oak tree, and later, still in my apartment, I woke to the smell of charred wood and smoke. The air was thick with it, heavy in my lungs. I stumbled to the window, heart pounding, certain the building was on fire. But outside, the street was silent under fresh snow. No flames, no smoke. Only the faint outline of a boy in the reflection of the glass, a boy with ash streaked across his face. David Burke. He had burned in a downtown fire, trapped when the stairwell collapsed. Jenny, Chris, David, all dead, years ago. All from our class, and now somehow all with me. By the third night, I couldn't pretend anymore. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't memory playing tricks. It was a summons. Daniel's summons. So I drove. The road back to Winton felt both familiar and alien, as if the years away had stretched it longer, carved new shadows into old landmarks. Snow slicked the asphalt, headlights cutting tunnels through the storm. The closer I got, the heavier the air grew, as if the town itself had been holding its breath all these years. When I turned onto Winton Road, my chest cinched tight. The bridge loomed ahead, skeletal against the pale moon. The boards sagged, some missing altogether. Iron bolts rusted to red teeth. Below, the river churned black and thick with broken ice. The air stank of iron and rot, and he was there. Daniel. At first, I thought it couldn't be real. A shadow, maybe, some cruel mirage. But as I stepped onto the frost-stiff boards, he turned. He looked older, but not in the way he should have. His face was leaner, but stretched too smooth, as if the years hadn't touched him naturally. His smile was too wide, his eyes reflecting a light that wasn't there. "Mara," he said, his voice spilling out like a memory. "You came." The sound of it nearly broke me. Part relief, part terror. "I thought you were dead." His smile didn't waver. "I never left. I've been waiting." The wind cut sharp through my coat, but the chill inside me was worse. "Daniel," I whispered. "What happened to you?" His eyes didn't blink. "You happened." Then came the sound. Footsteps, soft at first, then heavier, pressing down on the groaning boards. I turned toward the tree line and shapes began to emerge. Pale figures stepping out of shadow. Jenny Clark, Chris Hall, David Burke, and others. Faces I half remembered from school, each one stilled by death. They moved stiffly, their grins identical, eyes reflecting nothing. They gathered behind Daniel, silent, waiting. He stepped closer. "You left me that night. Now you'll stay." The words struck like ice water poured down my spine. Because he was right. I had left him. Frozen in fear, I had turned and run. I stumbled backward, splinters biting my palms as I grabbed the railing. My breath tore ragged from my chest. The figures moved with me. When I stepped back, they stepped forward, closing the space. Their smiles never broke. I don't remember how I ran. Only the tearing of my hands on wood, the burn in my legs, the laughter chasing me. Low, cracked, endless. The bridge thundered behind me, as if impossibly many feet pressed into it at once. I burst onto the road, lungs ripping, heart slamming. When I dared to look back, the bridge was empty. Only the wind moved. The police found nothing. Only my footprints circling on the frost, doubling back as if I'd been pacing. Talking to myself, but I know better. I know what I saw, and I know this isn't over. That night in my apartment, the phone rang again. When I answered, it wasn't just Daniel's voice. It was layered. Jenny's gurgling whisper, Chris's low moan, David's cracked rasp. All together speaking fragments of the same phrase, "You left us." The radiator hissed, and beneath it I swore I heard water churning. I hung up, but the silence was worse because I knew they would call again, and next time, I might answer. I barely slept after that night. When I closed my eyes, I was back on the bridge, splinters under my hands. Daniel's smile cutting through the dark. When I opened them, the city seemed warped, tilted, no longer a place I recognized. I walked through Philadelphia like a ghost, drifting from the subway to the archives, clutching my coat tighter against a cold no one else seemed to feel. Everywhere I went, they followed. The first time I was shelving files in the basement of the archives. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed against my skull, the paper dust thick in my nose. As I reached for a box, the faint drip of water echoed down the hallway. The basement wasn't supposed to leak, there hadn't been rain in days. But the sound grew louder, trickling, then pouring until the smell of algae and lake water filled the air. I turned. The far wall shimmered as if submerged, and in its wavering reflection I saw her. Jenny Clark. Hair tangled with weeds, lips blue, her eyes locked on mine. She pressed her hand to the surface as though begging me to reach back. Water seeped from the concrete, sliding toward my shoes. I blinked and the wall was dry. The hallway silent, but my hands trembled so badly I dropped the file. Another time on the subway, the train screeched to a halt between stops. The lights flickered, throwing everyone into brief darkness. For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint groan of metal bending under weight. Then the crash came, glass shattering, screams, the sound of a car folding into itself. My chest seized as the acrid stench of burnt oil and hot rubber filled the air. I whipped my head toward the window, and there he was, Chris Hall, grinning through the fractured glass, his face bloodied, his eyes lit with a manic spark. When the light steadied, there was nothing. Just my own reflection staring back, pale and drenched in sweat. The other passengers didn't look up from their phones. The worst was David. I woke in my apartment to the smell of smoke. Thick, choking, acrid. The air was hot, pressing against my skin. Shadows flickered across the walls as if flames licked just out of sight. My throat burned and panic surged. I stumbled for the door, ready to pound on neighbors' doors to scream. But when I looked back, he was standing in the corner, David Burke. Ash streaked across his face, skin blistered and raw. His eyes glowed faintly like embers. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. And then he opened his mouth, smoke poured out, curling across the ceiling. The alarms never went off. When I blinked, the apartment was empty. The smoke gone, but the faint scent of burnt wood lingered for days, no matter how much I scrubbed. I started to come apart. At work, I forgot names, misplaced files. My supervisor asked if I was all right, her voice tight with suspicion. On the subway, I flinched at every flicker of light. At night, I sat awake, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for the inevitable call. It always came. Sometimes Daniel spoke alone. Sometimes their voices layered, twisting, gurgling, moaning through the static. Always the same message. You left us. Each time it carved deeper, because they weren't wrong. I was 16 again on the bridge. Daniel had dared me to cross the center beam, the narrow iron rail spanning the ravine. We'd done it before, laughing, arms spread wide for balance. But that night he was reckless, taunting me, moving faster. "Keep up, Mara," he'd called. I remember the board beneath my feet cracking, the sharp snap. I remember Daniel's arms flailing, his eyes wide with sudden terror. He'd reached for me, fingers brushing mine, and I had pulled back. I could have grabbed him, could have tried. But fear surged through me. Fear of falling, fear of being dragged down. For a split second I chose myself, and he fell. The silence after was unbearable, the splash swallowed by rushing black water. I ran, I didn't look back. I never told anyone what really happened. Now they knew. The hauntings grew bolder. In the reflection of skyscraper glass, I saw them lined behind me, grinning. In the lull between subway stations, whispers curled in my ear, wet and gurgling. My apartment became a trap. Shadows lengthened. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards at night, though I lived alone. And always, Daniel's voice threaded through it all. "Remember the promise in the creek, Mara? You broke it for good air." He was right again. We had promised years ago, splashing in the shallows, that we'd never abandon each other, that if one of us slipped, the other would dive in, no matter what. But I had broken that. One night the phone rang, and I didn't hesitate. I answered, breathless, as if I'd been waiting all my life. "Daniel," I whispered. Static swelled, then cleared. His voice was close, intimate, like he was leaning against my ear. "Come back to me." My chest tightened. "I can't. You already have." And the line went silent, but I heard it anyway, the heavy, steady churn of black water. I stopped going to work. The outside world felt thin, unreal, like a set dressing for something much larger creeping in. My landlord pounded on the door, demanding rent, but his voice seemed distant, muffled by the hiss of static always in my ears. Nights stretched into days, dreams into waking. Sometimes I saw Daniel standing at the foot of my bed, his smile too wide, his eyes reflecting that impossible light. Other times it was Jenny dripping lake water onto my floor, or Chris leaving oil stains on my sheets, or David, smoke curling from his mouth. The collective never spoke. Only Daniel did. "You left us. Now you'll stay." The final night came without fanfare. The phone rang and I answered. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I whispered, "I'm coming home." The static cleared, replaced by silence. And then, faint but steady, the sound of black water churning. I knew what I had to do. The drive back to Winton was dreamlike. Snow blurred the windshield, the road winding like a scar through the woods. My body moved on its own, hands gripping the wheel though I barely felt them. When I reached the bridge, the air was still, heavy with cold. Frost glittered across the planks like shards of glass, and there they were, Daniel standing at the railing. Jenny, Chris, David, and the others fanned behind him, their smiles identical, their eyes catching no light. I stepped onto the boards. The wood groaned beneath me, each creak echoing into the ravine. My breath plumed white, and with each step the air grew colder. Daniel's eyes locked on mine. "You came." My throat tightened. "I never stopped hearing you." "You remember." "I do." He reached out his hand. The same hand that had reached for me all those years ago. This time I didn't pull back. The boards shuddered under us, the laughter swelling, cracked, and endless. The river below churned louder, louder, as if it were calling my name. I closed my eyes and stepped forward. They never found me. At least, not the way I was. The police report said my car was abandoned near Winton Road, tracks leading toward the bridge, but none returning. In Philadelphia, my apartment stayed empty, dust settling over unpaid bills and cold coffee cups. But I know the truth, because sometimes, when the night is still and the river ice breaks, I hear the laughter carried on the wind. And if you ever find yourself on Winton Road, near the old bridge, you might hear it too. The sound of many voices woven into one, whispering through the dark, "You left us, now you'll stay." I wasn't planning on going to the reunion. High school was something I left behind like a sealed grave. Madison High with its cracked linoleum, lockers scarred with keys, and that faint mildew smell in the vents belonged to a version of me I refused to exhume. My adult life in Syracuse was small, lonely, but orderly. I had my job at the hospital, my rent above a laundromat, my quiet routines. I didn't need ghosts scratching at the door, but then the email came. 2 words. "See you there, B." My throat closed the second I read it. Only one person ever called me that, Rachel Myers. My shadow, my best friend, my tormentor. My mistake. She'd been gone for 12 years, dead in the quarry's black water, and yet here she was, writing to me like no time had passed. I told myself it was a prank, that someone found an old yearbook and wanted to stir up pain. But when I looked again, the name at the bottom carried her fingerprint. Rachel always had a way of writing my nickname with a flourish, looping the B as if it were a crown. So I went. The gymnasium smelled the same. Polish, sweat, faint chlorine from the pool on the other side of the wall. Streamers drooped over folding tables draped in blue and gold cloths, trying to disguise a place that had never changed. Old classmates buzzed in clusters, plastic cups raised, eyes scanning each other for victories and failures. Mark Turner spotted me first. His shoulders had thickened. The badge on his belt glinted when he moved. He gave me the kind of smile cops practice, friendly but evaluating. "B, long time." Lindsay Collins swept in with her perfume, hair too black, smile too wide. She bragged about her marriages like tally marks. I nodded, polite, waiting for my chance. Finally, I asked, "Anyone seen Rachel?" The shift was immediate. Lindsay's face pinched. Mark's eyes darted away. "She died, Beatrice," Lindsay whispered, leaning close. "You were at her funeral. Don't you remember?" I remembered. The closed casket, the priest droning about mercy, people's eyes sliding over me with pity, with suspicion. I remembered lying, saying she slipped, that it was dark, that there was nothing I could do. But the truth was heavier. The quarry night returned sharp as broken glass. We were 17, drunk on cheap vodka, the bottle slick between us. The water below was ink, swallowing the stars. Rachel dangled my necklace, the silver bee charm my mother gave me, over the drop. "Want it back? Come get it." Her voice curled with mockery. She loved to dangle power like bait. I reached for her wrist. "Rachel, don't." She laughed, tucked the necklace in her pocket, and stepped closer to the edge. "Fine, I'll fetch it. Since you're too scared." Her foot slid on wet stone. She grabbed for me and I hesitated. For just an instant. Because part of me was tired of being her echo, her shadow, her toy. Part of me wanted her to feel that helplessness. When she slipped, her hand caught mine. I felt her weight, her terror, her strength. I could have pulled. Instead, I pulled away. Just an inch, enough. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened. Then she was gone, swallowed by black water. I stood frozen as bubbles broke, thrashed, disappeared, my throat locked. I didn't scream, didn't jump. I watched until the quarry went still, until the only sound was the vodka sloshing in the bottle at my feet. That was my sin. Not watching her die, but choosing to. The reunion blurred after that. I left early, heart pounding, Rachel's eyes burning into me. Back in Syracuse, she found me. It began small. The drip of water in the apartment with no leak. A smell of algae under the radiator. Then my phone lit up, Rachel. The photo on the screen, her senior portrait, wasn't saved anywhere on my device, I answered, trembling. Hello, gurgling. Not static. Not a voice. Just bubbles breaking, someone choking. I slammed the call away. It rang again, same name, same picture. I hurled it against the couch, but the sound went on, shrill, inescapable. At the hospital, the haunting followed. The pediatric wing always smelled sterile, raw bleach, metal. But under my palms, every surface turned slick. Pond scum. Slime. The IV drips clicked in a rhythm that wasn't medical. It was her laugh. Broken, bubbling. A boy, skin pale from chemo, clutched my wrist. Why is the wet lady crying? My heart stopped. What lady? He pointed to the corner. She's crying water, but the water goes up, not down. I froze. His mother glared, muttering about nightmares, but his eyes followed something invisible, and my skin went cold. Later, a little girl whispered, "She's smiling at you." She doesn't blink, I turned. The chair was empty, but a small puddle shimmered on the tile. When I blinked again, it was gone. Sleep abandoned me. Food lost taste. I answered fewer calls until my phone stayed silent. My coworkers whispered about my shaking hands, my vacant stares. Dr. Patel pulled me aside, gentle but insistent. "Beatrice, you're not yourself." "Do you want me to recommend leave?" I lied. Like always, the dreams sharpened. Rachel rose from the quarry, skin bloated, white eyes gleaming with hate. Her grip on my wrist crushed bone. I coughed water, though I hadn't fallen in. My lungs seized my chest, screaming. When I woke, bruises circled my arm. The phone rang again. Same name, same picture. I answered, sobbing. A whisper, wet and broken. "You left me, B." I hurled the phone, but the words clung like algae. The apartment warped. Water bled from walls. The floor swelled soft under my feet, wood groaning as if it remembered drowning. Wallpaper bubbled with moisture. The air grew heavy, metallic, algae thick in my nostrils. I pressed myself into the bedroom, locked the door. The wood bulged, darkened, water seeping through the cracks in steady streams. The carpet darkened, swelling under my toes. Her footsteps dragged closer. Slow, deliberate. The smell hit. Iron. Algae, pond scum. Then her voice, thick with water. From just beyond the door. "You let me fall, B." My chest collapsed inward. My throat filled. I coughed, gagged, choking, though there was no water to see. My lungs burned. The door swelled and split. Rachel stepped through. Her hair floated around her head, weightless. Her skin hung loose, pale as soaked wood. Her eyes gleamed brighter than the rest of her face. She smiled. Crooked, familiar. The same smile she gave before daring me into the dark. And then she touched my cheek. The cold went straight into my skull. My lungs seized again. My body convulsed. I coughed water, spat it across the carpet. Her whisper slid into my ear. "Come home." When I woke, I was on gravel, barefoot, bleeding. The night sky spun above. The quarry stretched black and endless before me. Rachel stood on the far edge, waiting. And I knew I was never going to leave her again. The gravel cut my feet raw, every sharp edge biting through skin, but I barely noticed. The quarry stretched before me, black and endless, breathing with a rhythm that felt older than time. Each pulse tugged at me, as if my heart were sinking with its hidden beat. Rachel stood on the far side, her silhouette glowing faintly, as though moonlight bent itself around her. She didn't move toward me. She simply waited, head tilted, eyes shining with a familiarity that stripped me bare. B. My name shivered across the water, not carried by air but by something heavier, something that sank straight into bone. I froze. The night pressed against my ribs until every breath sounded foreign. I wanted to tell myself this was still a dream, that trauma had rewired my brain to punish me. But the bruises on my wrists throbbed, ugly and purple, proof of her grip. Rachel began to walk across the surface, not sinking, not disturbing the water, just gliding, each step leaving oily ripples that spread and then vanished. "You left me," she said, voice thick with water. "You wanted me gone." Her words clawed back memories I'd spent 12 years shoving into shadows, the vodka burning my throat, the necklace dangling over the edge, her hand clutching mine, the heat of anger in my chest stronger than fear, and then the smallest pull away. Just enough. My lungs tightened as though the quarry itself was waiting for me to inhale it. I stumbled backward, trying to break her spell, but the ground softened under me. The gravel turned to something swollen, spongy, wood waterlogged and breathing. The smell of algae rose in waves, sharp and metallic. The world tilted. My apartment walls surged up around me. The hall outside my bedroom dripped. Paint sagged and split, releasing thin streams of dark water that puddled at my feet. The floorboards bulged under my weight, soft, bending like they might collapse into the quarry beneath. The phone rang. The screen glowed. Rachel. That same photo, the yearbook smile, her hair curled neatly, burned against the dark. I answered with trembling hands. On the other end, the sound of water filling lungs. Bubbles. Then a laugh. Low and broken. "You watched me drown." My knees buckled. Her voice hissed like water forced through pipes. "No, you pulled away." I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a splash, though there was no puddle. At the hospital, nothing stayed sterile anymore. The pediatric ward's sharp bleach smell turned sour in my nose, layered with algae and rust. The moment I touched anything, IV poles, counters, clipboards, it slicked with slime under my fingers. IV drips no longer ticked steady. They echoed Rachel's laughter, bubbling, mocking. Children noticed before adults did. A boy, pale and bald from chemo, tugged on my sleeve. "The wet lady keeps crying," he whispered. His lips trembled, but his eyes stayed locked on the corner of the room. "Where?" I asked, throat tight. He pointed. "There, but the water doesn't fall down. It goes up." His mother snapped at him to stop scaring himself. But I saw it. The vent above the bed dripping upward, streams of water rising like reversed rain, drawn into a shadow that rippled against the wall. Another girl whispered. "She's standing by the door. She keeps smiling at you. Her teeth look wrong." I forced a smile, patting the girl's blanket, but when I turned my head, a puddle shimmered under the doorframe. When her mother shifted in the chair, it was gone. The worst came when one boy sat bolt upright in bed, eyes glazed. He whispered, "She has your necklace." My heart stopped. I hadn't worn it in years. I'd buried it deep in a drawer, too guilty to throw away, too guilty to wear. How could he know? I left his room trembling, sweat soaking through my scrubs. Sleep brought no rest. Rachel rose from the quarry in dreams, her skin bloated, pale, her nails digging deep enough to crack bone. She dragged me under without moving, her hands crushing, her hair wrapping around my face like seaweed. The water forced itself into my throat, metallic and green. My lungs filled, though I never drew breath. I woke choking, coughing up a stream of water that soaked my pillow. My sheets smelled of algae. I unplugged the phone, but it rang anyway. Always Rachel. Always the same picture. The voicemails grew longer. Sometimes only gurgles. Sometimes wet laughter. Sometimes whispers that coiled into me. "B, come home. I'm waiting." Even when I didn't answer, I heard her. Through the faucet hiss. Through the hum of the fridge. Through the buzz of fluorescent lights in the hospital. Her voice wormed into everything. One night, the apartment surrendered completely. The ceiling bulged, sagging heavy with water. The wallpaper bubbled and peeled, streams running down in rivulets that stank of algae. The floorboards pulsed, rippling like the surface of a lake. I pressed myself into a corner, heart galloping. She emerged from the hallway. Not walking, drifting. Her feet left puddles that spread across the rug, then vanished. Her hair floated around her head. Her smile stretched too wide, cracking at the corners. "You're mine, B." Her hand brushed my cheek. My lips turned numb. My chest locked. I coughed, but water forced its way out instead of air. My lungs flooded, though I was still standing. The room tilted, the walls dissolving into black water. The quarry swallowed me again. Stars fractured across the surface. My knees bled into gravel. Rachel stood inches away now, dripping but alive with a cruel kind of grace. She reached for me, nails sharp, grip cold enough to freeze blood. I tried to fight. My hands tore at her swollen arms, but her skin was soft like rotting wood, breaking under my nails. She didn't flinch, her voice bubbled. "You're coming with me," she pulled. My body stumbled forward. My lungs seized, filling again. I gagged, spitting water onto the gravel, coughing until my throat tore. The quarry's surface shimmered, closer, waiting. "Rachel, stop!" I choked. I'm sorry," her eyes gleamed. "So am I." At the edge, she stopped. The water gleamed blacker than night. "Look," she whispered. I did. The surface reflected not me, but her. Rachel's face rose from the water, alive, breathing steady, her chest rising and falling. She blinked. She inhaled. She smiled. I tried to mirror her. I tried to breathe. My chest locked. My throat refused. No air came. My vision narrowed, black creeping in at the edges. Rachel's reflection smiled wider. And in that instant I understood. She was breathing. I wasn't. The last sound I heard was her laughter, bubbling, echoing, swallowing me whole, and then silence. My name is Claire Donovan, and I was 31 when Melissa found me again. The message arrived on a wet October night, my phone buzzing against the chipped nightstand like it had something urgent to say. "Let's catch up. Been too long. Same place?" The name above it, Melissa Roth. I froze. It wasn't just shock, it was the kind of fear that lives deep in your marrow. Melissa had been my shadow in high school, my mirror, the girl who knew my secrets, and the one I abandoned the night of the fire. I told myself not to answer, but my hands didn't listen. I typed back one word. Okay. The hospital had been brutal that week. I worked third shift at St. Joseph's in Buffalo, and by the time I dragged myself home each morning, the world smelled of bleach and my own skin felt scrubbed raw. The fluorescent buzz of the ward never left my ears. I lived in order, vitals, medications, charting, hand-washing, control. Without it, I drowned in the sounds, coughs rattling like broken glass, the hiss of oxygen, the shrill alarms that never stopped. My apartment reflected the same need. Mugs stacked rim to rim, shoes aligned perfectly by the door, sheets smoothed so tight they looked pressed. If I kept everything sharp, sterile, maybe the past wouldn't seep back in. But Melissa's name cracked it open. The same place. The words dropped me straight into memory. The shed behind her father's house. The smell of gasoline sharp in my throat. Melissa's laugh daring me on. The match head flaring. A brief kiss of sulfur before the wood caught. And then, the sound. The door latch sliding down. Not just heard, but seen. Melissa's hand pulling it into place with a smirk, locking whatever or whoever was inside. I'd laughed at first, not understanding, until I heard it, a muffled cry, high and panicked. Not a man's, not even a woman's. A small voice. I'd seen a child's tricycle in the corner earlier that night, leaned against the wall. Or maybe it was the neighbor's dog that used to yap constantly. I never checked. I only ran, and Melissa ran with me. The next night I drove through drizzle to the ruins of the skating rink. Streetlights hummed faintly, their halos smeared by rain. Melissa stood under one as if she'd never left. She wore her old denim jacket, seams frayed in the same places as when we were 17. But it looked too perfect, preserved as if in a vacuum, untouched by time or weather. Her skin was pale like old marble, smooth and faintly translucent, veins threaded just beneath. Her smile wasn't joy, it was a diagram of a smile, a shape without feeling. "You came," she said, voice steady. "Melissa," my throat was dry. "You remember." She tilted her head. The rain slid down my hair, soaking me. Her jacket stayed bone dry. She asked me about the past, every word a needle. "Do you remember the shed? How it smelled? How hot it got?" I shook my head, though the smell of gasoline filled my nostrils again. Her lips curved slightly. "You saw me drop the latch. You heard the cry, and you still ran." I staggered back, breath caught. "You left me," she whispered. "And him." When she asked me to drive her home, I should have refused. But I unlocked the door. The address was inevitable. Delaware Avenue. Her family's house, the one abandoned after the fire. The siding was charred, boards warped like melted wax. Yet Melissa climbed the steps without hesitation. her shoes making no sound. Inside, the air was sour and damp, filled with mildew and faint smoke. The floor sagged under me, but Melissa moved with fluid grace, touching blackened door frames as though greeting them. The mirror above the fireplace reflected me, hollow-eyed, shaking. Melissa's place in the glass was empty. "Why here?" I whispered. "Because it's home." She looked at me with those wide pupils that never shrank. "Why did you leave him in there?" The door slammed. The knob refused to turn. The windows showed no buffalo lights, no rain, no street. Only blackness, as though the world had been erased. The air shifted. I heard it again, the latch. Not the metallic click from memory, but a sharp syllable of metal, final and damning. The shadows peeled from the walls. The outline of the shed appeared in the plaster. Door shut, flames flickering. Behind it, a smaller shadow clawed and writhed. I ran. I don't remember how I escaped. Only that I woke in my car parked blocks away, my clothes damp, my skin stinking of smoke. At the hospital, I tried to push it down, but the haunting followed. The first time, Melissa sat in the waiting room at 3 a.m., her marble skin glowing faintly beneath the fluorescent lights. The air around her smelled of wet ash cutting through antiseptic. The second time, a dementia patient clutched my wrist as I adjusted her IV. "The girl with the smoke in her hair," she whispered, eyes wide. "She says you're a bad nurse." I froze. The old woman began to sob, pointing at the corner. When I turned, the corner was empty, but the smell lingered, gasoline threaded with disinfectant. By my third shift after Melissa's return, I couldn't ignore it. The beeps of the monitors bent into laughter, her laughter broken and sparking. The chlorine sting of the cleaning solution turned to gasoline. My hands trembled on the medicine cart. I dropped a syringe. It clattered, echoing too loudly. I fled the corridor, abandoning the cart, my heart hammering. And as I stumbled into the break room, I saw my reflection in the vending machine. My face gaunt hollow, but the eyes were wrong. They burned faint orange, coals buried in ash. Behind me, Melissa's hand rested on my shoulder. When I spun, the room was empty. That night, as I lay awake, my phone lit without a sound. On the dark screen, handwriting appeared as if traced by condensation. "Liar." I pressed the button to wake it fully. The word vanished, but the glass still felt damp beneath my fingertips. I worked the next 3 nights like I was carving pieces of myself into the sterile walls of St. Joseph's. I clung to routine the way a drowning woman clings to driftwood. Check wristband, verify chart, scan meds, confirm dose, document. If I held on to the ritual, Melissa couldn't slip through. If I built my walls high enough, she couldn't climb over. But the first night proved how useless walls are against smoke. In room 3B, Mrs. Leone, 86, dementia, bird-like hands, watched me with eyes suddenly clear. Her thin fingers clamped my wrist with surprising strength. "The girl with the smoke in her hair says you're a bad nurse," she whispered. The chart slipped in my other hand. My pulse stuttered. "What girl, Mrs. Leone?" Her clouded gaze tracked the corner of the room, her mouth softening into a smile. "She's behind you." She licked her lips like she tasted something only she could taste. "She likes your old name. She says Clary Bear, the nickname. 15 years buried. No one alive should remember it. Would you like some water?" I asked, voice brittle. Mrs. Leone giggled, girlish, then whispered, "She says you left the latch down." My chest caved. My mind dragged me backward, 15 years to the shed. Melissa's hand sliding the bolt shut. That little smirk. And me watching, frozen. At the time I told myself it was nothing, just a dare. A laugh, but then the sound. The high, panicked yelp of something trapped. A voice too small to be a man. The jingle of a dog's collar bell. Or a child's whimper. My brain never settled on which, but it didn't matter. Something small had been locked inside. Something that burned. I yanked my wrist free and fled the room, heart pounding loud enough to drown the beeping monitors. The corridor reeked of antiseptic until it didn't. The smell bent, mid-inhale, to gasoline braided with wet ash. My stomach lurched. Volunteers walked past, oblivious. No one smelled what I smelled. No one heard the faint, broken laugh threaded beneath the monitor's alarms. I shoved the medicine cart forward. Siring is rattled. The beeps warped into Melissa's giggles, jagged and wrong. My hands shook so badly I miscalculated a dose twice before abandoning the math altogether. The brushed steel pyxis reflected my face, and for one stretched, impossible second, my eyes glowed ember orange. Melissa stood behind me in the reflection, hand on my shoulder, though when I turned, the hall was empty. I left the cart where it was. I fled to the supply closet, plunging myself into dark. I pressed my forehead to the cold shelves, breathing in bleach, counting. In 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4. That was when I heard it. Not a memory this time. Not imagined, right by my ear, the sharp final syllable of metal. The latch I had seen it that night. Not just heard, seen, Melissa's hand sliding it down, her eyes daring me to stop her. My laughter hollow, covering fear. And then the muffled cry, small and desperate. I had run. I had let Melissa run too. The closet smelled like smoke now. My eyes watered. By the time I stumbled back out, my phone was glowing in my pocket. No buzz, no ding. Just a message already written across the black screen in foggy script, like condensation on glass. Russo 4C, Mr. Russo, chronic heart failure, 2 doors down. I swiped the screen, smearing the letters into damp streaks. When I entered his room, the monitor stuttered. For 1 second, his waveform spelled a blocky green word. Liar. I blinked. The waveform returned to normal, a calm heartbeat in the dark. The smell of gasoline threaded the oxygen hiss. Second night, I tried again. Another routine. Another wall. A dehydrated teenager needed a line. I liked pediatric sticks, clean victories. I tied the tourniquet, warmed the vein with a glove. The boy watched me, eyes nervous. The overhead light hummed, and inside that hum I heard it. The scrape of a bolt sliding. Not memory, not echo. A live sound, Clary Bear, it hissed, and my hand slipped. The bevel missed. Blood beaded on the boy's skin. I ripped my gloves off, mumbling apology, letting the intern take over. My red-stained fingertips felt like evidence. In the break room, I wrapped both hands around a paper cup of coffee, clinging to the heat. You look like reheated death, Sheila said, dropping into the seat across from me. Night shift chic, I muttered. The intercom popped with static. Then a whisper, clear, almost tender. You owe me. Coffee sloshed over my hands. You didn't hear that? I asked Sheila. Hear what? Nothing. My smile was a fracture. That night the elevator mirrored me in 4 shining panels. My reflection fractured. One smiling, one crying, one frowning, one blank. In the bottom right, Melissa's smile stretched across my mouth. A diagram of a grin. The doors opened and it was gone. The third night snapped the trap shut. I was pushing the cart past the back stairwell when the door creaked open. Cold air spilled out, reeking of wet timber. I stepped inside. It wasn't a stairwell. It was the shed. Charred studs ribbed the walls. The floor sagged, blackened. In the corner crouched a shadow, small, folded tight. A child's size. Or a dog's. Hello? My voice was thinner than air. The shadow raised its head. No face, just depth. And then it reached its hand, if it was a hand, brushed my calf. Wet ash clung, marking me through my scrubs, 5 small prints pulsing faintly. I tore back into the hospital corridor, gasping. A transporter stared. You okay? Wrong door, I lied. But when I stripped at home, the prints were there. Faint gray hand marks burned into skin. No soap touched them. No water washed them away. Sleep was denim blue. Melissa leaned over me in the dream the way she had at 16, hair curtaining secrets. We locked him in together, she whispered. Her finger traced the ash mark at my ankle. Cold, without temperature. Do you remember the bell on the terrier's collar? Or the tricycle wheel squeaking? I woke with the ash mark burning. The next morning, my badge access was revoked. Suspension. Unsafe to practice, they said. I wasn't surprised. The truth was, I had already left. That night, my phone lit without touch. Another fogged word traced across the screen. Same place. You owe me. The house on Delaware waited. Melissa stood on the porch. Her jacket was as crisp as the night she'd first worn it, preserved like glass. Her skin gleamed marble pale under the rainless sky. Come home, Claire, she said. The door opened at her hand. Inside, the house breathed. Walls swelled and contracted. Dust shifted like lungs. The floor bent like wet sponge. The mirror above the fireplace reflected me. But my mouth curved Melissa's smile. The shadows peeled from the walls. The shed's outline rose in plaster. The bolt slid shut with a whisper. and the shadow child reached again. Its handprint already marked my leg, pulsing. Melissa tilted her head. "Why did you leave him, Claire? Why did you let me lock it?" The shadow screamed silently. It touched my leg again. This time the ash mark sank into skin, disappearing. The door wouldn't open. The windows showed void. The house laughed. I don't remember leaving. I woke in my apartment, damp with sweat, heart hammering. The ash mark was gone. In the mirror above my sink, I saw myself. My tired eyes, high sagging mouth, but when I blinked, the mouth smiled. Melissa's smile. At dawn, I sat with coffee. Steam curled upward. I wrapped my hands around the cup. It should have burned. I felt nothing. I was 29 the night Caleb reached out again. A simple message on my phone. "Still up? I'm in town." The name alone made my chest tighten. Caleb Hart, my first friend. My first betrayal. We grew up in Ashwood, Pennsylvania, just 2 houses apart, back when the woods behind our cul-de-sac were our kingdom. Summers meant bruised shins, scraped palms, and pockets full of stones we swore were fossils. Winters meant snow forts and late-night whispers. Under the blankets when one of us sneaked into the other's room. But the last night I saw him, June 12, 2008, dragged me to Miller's Quarry for one final dare. A boy named Trevor never came home. By morning, Caleb had vanished too. I buried the truth in silence and distance, moved to Philadelphia, rebuilt a quieter life. And then, years later, his name lit up my screen. My apartment was a narrow one-bedroom wedged above a bakery on Walnut Street. The walls smelled faintly of yeast and sugar during the day, but at night, when the ovens cooled, the air was heavy with dust and damp plaster. That evening, I'd been folding laundry, the TV murmuring low in the background when the buzz of my phone made me flinch. The text glowed against the darkened screen. "Still up? I'm in town." I stared so long that the message blurred. My hand tingled where I held the phone, like the weight of it wasn't mine. Caleb. Not possible. I sat on the couch, motionless, until the clock on the wall clicked past midnight. Finally, I dropped the phone face down on the cushion, as though the glow might burn through. My breath came shallow. The radiator hissed in the corner, its old metal clank strangely rhythmic, like something counting. I didn't reply, but I didn't sleep either. The next morning at St. Luke's Hospital, fluorescent light pressed against my skull like a weight. The hallways smelled of antiseptic, sharp and metallic, mixed with the faint sweetness of latex gloves. I'd been a nurse there for 5 years, long enough that my body moved on autopilot, checking vitals, adjusting IV drips, answering call buttons with rehearsed calm. But I couldn't focus. My hands trembled when I tried to slide a needle into a vein. My eyes snagged on shadows moving where no one walked. Dr. Angela Harris caught me in the supply room, her brow furrowing. She was 36, tall and composed, her dark hair pulled into a perfect bun. "You're pale as hell," she said, tugging a box of gauze from the shelf. "You sleep last night?" "Not much. You look like you're about to pass out." "Drink water. Eat something that's not from a vending machine." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." Her eyes lingered on me longer than I wanted, as though she knew I was lying. That night, when I came home, there was another message waiting. "Remember the carved initials? The oak behind your house." My throat closed. No one else knew about that tree. Caleb and I had cut into the bark with his father's hunting knife the summer we were 12. "C. Plusm forever." The scar of it had outlasted everything else. I typed, "Who is this?" 3 dots pulsed. Then, "Caleb." I stared until the letters warped. My chest ached with memory, his laugh sharp and boyish echoing off stone. The sound of Trevor's scream as the quarry swallowed him. I threw the phone across the couch, the impact muffled against the cushions. My knees pressed together, shaking. For the first time in years, I thought about telling someone the truth. But who? Angela would send me home. Daniel, my supervisor, would put me on leave. And what would I even say? My dead best friend is texting me. The messages didn't stop. I miss the smell of wet pine. Still take the same route home? Nice mug. The chipped blue one. Coffee tastes better in it. That one made me drop my phone entirely. The mug was in my sink, rim cracked, coffee ring still clinging inside. I checked the locks on my door 3 times before I went to bed. The hum of the refrigerator sounded too loud, like static crawling under my skin. When sleep finally took me, it was shallow and restless. In my dreams, Trevor stood at the foot of my bed, water pooling around his sneakers. His lips moved, but his voice was the quarry itself, echoing deep, endless. Days blurred. I made mistakes at work, small ones at first, forgetting to chart vitals, miscounting pills, then bigger ones. My hands shook so badly during a night shift that I nearly punctured the wrong vein. Daniel called me into his office. He was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a kind face that looked wrong when stern. "Mara," he said, folding his hands, "I don't know what's going on, but you're distracted." "That's dangerous here." "Like, I'm fine," I whispered. He sighed. "Take a few days. Clear your head. Then come back, clear my head." As if that were possible. The phone calls started next. The first came at 3:12 a.m. I answered before I could think. "Mara." The voice was warped, waterlogged. Each syllable dripped. I froze, and then beneath the distortion, a laugh. Caleb's laugh. The same one from that night, bouncing off the quarry walls. I slammed the phone down. My heart thundered against my ribs so violently I thought they might crack. From the kitchen came the faint sound of water dripping. When I flipped on the light, the faucet was dry, yet a puddle spread across the tiles, rust-colored, smelling of iron. It grew worse after that. Walking the hospital halls, I caught glimpses of Trevor in the corner of my eye. His soaked jeans, his lips forming my name. Patients whispered things they shouldn't know. One elderly man, half drifting in morphine haze, grabbed my wrist and hissed, "The boy says you left him there." My breath caught. "What did you say?" But he had already closed his eyes, drifting back into silence. One night, Caleb sent a final message. "Meet me. Our place." My hands went cold. The quarry. I told myself I wouldn't go, that it was insane, that if I stepped foot there again, I'd never leave. But curiosity, or guilt, or some darker pull gnawed until I couldn't resist. The road to Ashwood was the same as it had been a decade earlier. The highway stretched endless, lined with skeletal trees. The closer I drew to Miller's quarry, the heavier the air felt, as though each mile peeled something away from me. By the time I parked, the moon was high and the water below lay black, motionless, a sheet of glass waiting to break, and he was there, or something wearing him was there. Caleb stood by the edge, his smile twitching like a broken frame of film. His skin shimmered damp in the moonlight, his eyes glistening with lake water. When he laughed, it was too sharp, too sudden, as though cut from a recording. "Mara," he said, his voice rippling. My legs locked. He stepped closer, and the smell of rot rolled off his skin. Wet earth and rusted iron. The ground crumbled beneath me. I fell. The cold closed over my head, swallowing breath and sound. For a moment, I swore Trevor's hand clamped around mine, dragging me down into the dark. His eyes were pale voids, his grip unyielding. My lungs burned, but somehow, impossibly, I clawed upward. My nails split against rock as I pulled myself onto the jagged edge. I coughed, gasped, and when I looked back, I was alone. The quarry lay silent under the moon, black water unbroken. I left Ashwood before the sun rose, raw and bleeding, but alive. Philadelphia feels different now, quieter, empty in a way it never was before. But at night, my phone still buzzes. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear it, water dripping onto the bedroom floor, drop after drop, steady as a clock. Caleb isn't gone. He's waiting. And he wants me back where it ended. I was 31 when I heard from Grace again. Her name lit up my phone on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of night where gutters overflowed and the city lights bled into smudged halos through the glass of my apartment. The radiator hissed unevenly. The air carried a faint sting of carpet cleaner, and I sat at my kitchen table sorting case briefs I'd carried home from work. My life ran on order, neat piles and clipped edges, the hum of law offices echoing in my head even at night. The message was short. "It's been too long. Same place tomorrow?" My stomach tightened. Grace Holloway, my first best friend, my fiercest rival. The girl who vanished 13 years ago at Ridgeway Park. The police said runaway. Her parents begged on television. People whispered about predators or drugs. But I never told anyone what I knew. The laughter that turned into screaming. The dare that became something else entirely. The moment I turned away and let her fall. I had built my career on verifiable fact. Paralegals lived in the small spaces between certainty, dates, evidence, documents. I thrived in neat columns, color-coded folders, the cold comfort of text and citation. Facts didn't shift in the dark. Facts didn't laugh from behind you. So when I opened my phone again, I expected the message to have evaporated. A glitch, a dream. But it was there, clear, sharp. Grace. I didn't reply. I didn't sleep. Morning came with dull gray light. I worked through it like a machine, filing motions, organizing discovery binders. My hands moved automatically, but my eyes kept flicking toward the printer. Each time it groaned to life, my chest tightened. At 2:13 p.m., a page slid out. Crisp typed, my name on top in all caps, Clara Bentley, beneath it, why did you leave me? The font was Times New Roman, 12-point justified margins. Just like every deposition transcript we produced, my throat closed. I snatched it, slid it into my briefcase before anyone saw. By the end of the week, more came. Filed into my folders without explanation, pinned to the corkboard above my desk. Perfectly formatted subpoenas, but signed by Grace. Each one asked a single question. Did you hear me scream? Did you see me fall? I told myself it was a prank, but the bruise on my arm said otherwise. The bruise had started when she touched me, that night in the park, when I forced myself to go. I told myself I only wanted proof, some sick prankster I could confront. But when I saw her, leaning against the broken swing set, her hair dripping as though she'd just surfaced from a river, I froze. Her smile was too steady. Her hoodie was the pale yellow one she'd worn the night she vanished. You came. Her voice was wrong, hollow, like it echoed from underground. When she touched my arm, her fingers were ice. The gray bloom spread from that spot, an infection beneath the skin. Grace, I whispered. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you? I stumbled backward, shaking. You can't be here. Her smile widened. You left me. That night the dream returned. Ridgeway Park 13 years ago. The dare was Grace's idea, of course. It always was. The old antenna tower at the far end of the park, rusted through, fenced off with warnings about collapse. She laughed at the danger as always, and I, resentful, reckless, eager not to be left behind, followed her to the fence. Bet you won't climb higher than me, she taunted. Voice sharp in the dark. I hesitated, but I followed. The iron ladder shook beneath us, flakes of rust sticking to my palms. Halfway up I stopped. The police patrolled the park sometimes. We could get caught, suspended, expelled. The thought of my father's disappointment curdled in my stomach. Clara, Grace shouted down, grinning, hair wild in the wind. Don't quit now! But I did. Out of spite, out of fear, I climbed down. I still hear the sound. The shriek of rust giving way. The sickening crack when her body hit concrete. Not a scream so much as a gasp cut short. Bones against stone and then silence. I ran. In the weeks that followed, the bruise spread. First a shadow across my upper arm, then down toward my wrist, darker, branching. No lotion, no makeup concealed it. The apartment changed too. The sweet smell of fresh bread from the bakery below was swallowed by the reek of mildew and wet earth. My walls sweated moisture. Thin streaks of green algae grew between tiles in the bathroom, spreading faster than I could scrub. At night, water dripped from the ceiling, pooling black in corners. My shoes squelched in carpet that had been dry for years, and always her laughter threaded through the pipes. The notes changed. From printed to handwritten. The same loops I remembered from high school. Why didn't you reach for me? Did you enjoy watching me fall? One night I caught myself whispering answers aloud. No, I didn't mean to. And the mirror whispered back in her voice, "Oh, liar." At work I slipped. I used her phrases without meaning to. Outdated slang she'd said in 2008, words no one used anymore. My coworkers blinked at me, confused. I laughed wrong, too high-pitched, too sharp. In the restroom, I stared into the mirror and saw her smile hanging on my face, lingering half a second too long after I'd stopped. I scrubbed my reflection until my skin burned. I stopped leaving my apartment except for work. Even there, the walls betrayed me. The conference room clock dripped water down its face. The printer smeared algae across briefs. The notes were endless now, filling my desk drawers taped to my monitor, fluttering from the ceiling when the vents rattled. I burned them. They returned. The bruise had reached my collarbone, a map of veins that pulsed like roots beneath my skin. When I touched it, the skin was cold, slick. One night she appeared on the fire escape. Third floor, no ladder. Her nails scratched the glass, tap, tap, tap. I screamed until my throat shredded. She only smiled wider. I'm coming in. I tried to run, packed a bag, drove west until the highway blurred into nothing. But the exits folded back. Every sign pointed to Ridgeway Park. When I stopped for gas, the attendant's eyes were hollow, his voice in Grace's cadence. Why did you leave me? I drove until dawn and still I was at the gates of the park. She sat on the merry-go-round, spinning slow, eyes locked on me. You can't outrun me, Clara, she said. I'm already inside. The takeover was subtle, then relentless. I caught myself writing her name on case briefs, signing her initials on cover letters. In mirrors, my lips moved before I spoke. When I smiled, her teeth glinted back at me, sharper, hungrier. Her voice filled my head, steady, mocking, warm. Sometimes it drowned out my own. Sometimes it spoke as me. I laughed in meetings when nothing was funny. I whispered to co-workers things only Grace would say. They looked at me with polite horror, not sure what to do. I wasn't sure either. The apartment rotted around me. Mold crawled up the wallpaper, thick and green. The air grew swamp-heavy. The bruise bloomed black now, spreading across my chest. My bed sagged with damp. The floorboards creaked like bones. Each breath tasted of rust and dirt. Each night I dreamed of water filling my lungs, choking me awake. And then the dreams didn't end when I woke. The final night, she came inside. No barrier. No hesitation. I was at the kitchen sink when the faucet gushed black water, stinking of metal and grave dirt. Her reflection appeared in the window above it, smiling. Time's up, she whispered. Her mouth opened too wide. Water spilled from her lips, black and endless. It filled the kitchen, the hallway rising past my knees. I screamed, but the water surged into me, prying my jaw open, filling my throat, my lungs. I thrashed, choking, drowning on dry land. Her laughter echoed in my chest as the world dimmed. I woke, or maybe I didn't, in my bed. Sheets soaked, soil packed beneath my fingernails. My body felt wrong, loose, like it wasn't mine. In the mirror, Grace's smile bloomed where mine should be. My phone buzzed. Her name lit the screen, and this time when the call came, I answered.